Brittney Griner is playing a game, and this is what Brittney Griner calls. I was not going to comment on any of this stuff until this took place. Watch what she says. The entire internet has reacted to this. Here's Brittney Griner. They're playing against the Indiana Fever, and look what she's saying. Go ahead, Rob.
For the ticky-tack fouls that we were talking about earlier.
When the footage hit the internet, it didn't take long before the entire sports world stopped and stared. After fouling out during a heated game against the Indiana Fever, Brittney Griner could be heard muttering what sounded unmistakably like trash effing white girl. That moment, caught in crystal clear audio, would spark one of the most explosive controversies in recent WNBA history.
The ticky-tack fouls that we were talking about earlier today.
The clip ricocheted across social media, igniting a storm of outrage, debate, and raw emotion from every corner of the basketball world. But it wasn't just the comment that caused shockwaves, it was what happened next. Patrick Bet-David, the blunt and unapologetic founder of Valuetainment, saw the footage and responded with one of the most ruthless monologues the league has ever faced.
Well, that pretty much sounds like trash effing white girl.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just be honest.
So the whole market reacts to this.
His reaction wasn't just criticism, it was a full-scale demolition of everything he believes is broken within the WNBA: entitlement, hypocrisy, and the obsession with race narratives over performance. Viewers were left stunned, commentators divided, and fans demanded answers. Was it too far or long overdue? Drop a comment with the words "Save the game" if this kind of brutal honesty is exactly what the league needs. And don't forget to like and subscribe if this is the kind of sports truth that deserves more attention. The moment that lit the fuse came during a tense matchup between the Phoenix Mercury and the Indiana Fever. Brittney Griner, visibly frustrated after fouling out, made her way to the bench, but it wasn't her exit that drew attention. It was what the broadcast microphones picked up as she walked off. In a moment that stunned audiences and instantly went viral, Griner was heard muttering what sounded unmistakably like "trash effing white girl," in apparent reference to Caitlin Clark. The internet erupted. Fans replayed the clip frame by frame, trying to verify the audio, while media outlets scrambled to respond. But what pushed this beyond a typical sports scuffle was the racial tone behind the words, an angle that triggered a wave of backlash and debate. On Twitter, clips circulated at lightning speed, with hashtags like #GrinerRacist and #ClarkTargeted trending within hours. The league stayed silent, further inflaming public reaction. It wasn't just about trash talk anymore, it was about double standards and whether a line had been crossed. The clip became more than a moment, it became a symbol of deeper tensions in women's basketball. And it wouldn't take long before one of the internet's most outspoken voices took aim. The response came swiftly and with zero restraint. Patrick Bet-David, known for his sharp takes and no-nonsense delivery, didn't just criticize Brittney Griner, he eviscerated her. In a fiery segment on Valuetainment, Bet-David played the viral clip and paused, visibly stunned. Then came the verbal onslaught. He called Griner's comment racially charged, divisive, and emblematic of everything corroding the WNBA from the inside out. He didn't soften the blow or filter his disgust. To him, this wasn't just a player venting. It was a reflection of an entitled culture that resents success rather than earning it. Griner's words weren't taken as an isolated outburst. They were framed as part of a broader narrative where accountability had been replaced by identity politics. Bet-David slammed the league's silence, questioning why a comment like that wouldn't lead to suspension, or at least a public apology. He asked what the reaction would have been had the roles been reversed. The double standard, in his view, was clear. This wasn't just a call-out. It was a declaration that the WNBA's refusal to police its own stars was eating away at its credibility. And this, he warned, was just the beginning of the unraveling. As the Griner clip continued to dominate the conversation, other voices jumped into the chaos, and the narrative took a sharp, racial turn. Patrick Bet-David didn't hold back in identifying who he believed poured gasoline on the fire. First was Angel Reese, who publicly doubled down on earlier tensions with Caitlin Clark, using social media to frame Clark as a protected athlete due to her race. Then came DeMarcus Cousins, who echoed the same angle during an interview, suggesting that referees and media were coddling Clark simply because she was white. But the real tipping point, Bet-David claimed, came when Jamel Hill made a claim so outrageous, it stunned even seasoned commentators. Hill, without irony, declared that Angel Reese could become the Michael Jordan of the WNBA. The reaction was swift and incredulous. Patrick Bet-David pulled up the stats, 22.7% shooting from the field, among the worst percentages in league history, and asked how a player struggling to make layups could be compared to the greatest basketball player of all time. He framed it as a desperate attempt to push narratives over merit, calling out the media for insulting fans' intelligence. The race-based framing wasn't just divisive, it was, in his words, completely detached from reality. And as these claims spiraled out of control, the backlash only intensified. Just as the dust was beginning to settle, a new wave of outrage erupted, this time ignited by ESPN commentator Ryan Clark. During a televised segment, Clark targeted former NFL quarterback Robert Griffin III, also known as RG3, after he voiced support for Caitlin Clark amid the growing controversy.
To being able to read the expressions of a person and know their intent, know their character, know their perspective. But he does understand hate, because I think he also understands the hate of self. When you look at the play, which is all we can speak to as professionals, all we can speak to as analysts.
But rather than debate RG3's opinion, Ryan Clark dismissed it outright with a remark that shocked viewers. His take didn't matter because he was married to a white woman. The moment instantly became a lightning rod for criticism, not just from fans, but from across the media spectrum. Patrick Bet-David was quick to seize on the clip, calling it one of the most blatantly prejudiced and self-defeating statements to air on national television. He dissected it with brutal precision, arguing that it perfectly encapsulated the poisonous identity politics infecting modern sports discourse. The idea that a person's perspective on race could be invalidated by their choice of spouse, he said, was not only racist but fundamentally un-American. Bet-David went further, claiming this kind of rhetoric wasn't just toxic, it was destroying credibility. Instead of fostering meaningful discussion, commentators were now weaponizing personal lives to discredit anyone who didn't conform to the approved narrative. In his view, this wasn't sports journalism anymore, it was ideological warfare. If there was one moment that crystallized Patrick Bet-David's fury, it was the reminder of what Brittney Griner represented, not just as a player, but as a symbol of national sacrifice. Bet-David pulled no punches, recounting how the United States government had orchestrated a high-profile prisoner swap with Russia to bring Griner home, trading her freedom for the release of Victor Bout, one of the world's most dangerous arms dealers, known ominously as the Merchant of Death.
Brittney Griner, what she said about the NBA. This is so funny how all this stuff works out, right? She says, this is from Brittney, every time we play her, there's this commotion, like this loud rumbling from the stands. Turns out it's people, thousands of them, just sitting there, watching on purpose. It's very disruptive. It's called a freaking game that they pay you money to play. Don't play the game.
For Bet-David, the hypocrisy was staggering. A player granted that level of international priority, who became the face of a diplomatic crisis, had now turned around and insulted the very foundation of sportsmanship with a racially charged remark. He argued that Griner's conduct was not only disrespectful, but emblematic of a disturbing level of entitlement. To him, her behavior exposed the uncomfortable truth that the WNBA protects certain players at all costs, regardless of their performance or professionalism. The silence from the league only amplified the message. There would be no consequences, no accountability. Bet-David asked a pointed question. What message does it send when a player rescued at such immense cost responds not with gratitude or leadership, but with inflammatory conduct and media disdain? It was a rhetorical gut punch aimed squarely at the WNBA's leadership, and their unwillingness to address it spoke volumes. As public outrage swirled, another layer of controversy emerged, this time from a viral post that many initially believed was real. A satirical account released a fake interview in which Brittney Griner supposedly complained that Caitlin Clark was ruining what used to make the WNBA great.
Brittney Griner voiced frustration in a recent interview, claiming that Caitlin Clark is ruining what used to make the WNBA great. Wait for this.
Empty stands?
Tom, let me just...
Go ahead, I'm so mad.
WNBA games used to be a chill, quiet place. You could bring your laptop and relax, maybe even get a little work done. But now, it's like there's a large gathering of people watching us from the stands. Some of them are yelling crazy shit about what they're seeing, putting unfair pressure on us to score, like we're there for their entertainment, and that's pretty gross.
The fabricated quote claimed Griner missed the days when arenas were half empty and quiet enough to bring a laptop and get some work done. While most realized the statements were parody, the fact that they gained traction at all revealed just how plausible they felt. Patrick Bet-David seized on this, not to mock the satire itself, but to dissect why so many fans believed it could be real. He argued that the WNBA had fostered an environment where players appeared more annoyed by rising fan engagement than energized by it. Instead of celebrating packed arenas and national TV coverage, some of its stars were allegedly treating the spotlight like a burden.
I act like this.
Okay.
Rob, can you verify that this is what she said on the mom and pop WNBA model? That she's sick of the fan. And then she says, the whole thing is toxic. I saw a guy with his daughter in the crowd, both of them yelling, couldn't hear what they were saying exactly, but it was either about my performance or some light racism.
Bet David pointed to Griner's real complaints about Caitlin Clark's crowd-drawing presence as proof that the satire was only inches from the truth. The core issue, he argued, wasn't whether the quotes were real. It was that the entitled mindset behind them felt entirely authentic. In a league struggling for relevance, Bet David warned that this culture of resentment could be its undoing. In the midst of escalating attacks and racially charged narratives, Caitlin Clark made a move that surprised many, and according to Patrick Bet David, cost her more than it helped.
And I know Adam, I'm going to piggyback off of Adam because Adam's been saying this for a while, that this is why the WNBA is never, ever, ever going to work and never make money. And this is exactly what Caitlin Clark gets for bending the knee. Do you guys remember when she said, when we lost all respect for her, when she said, I want to say I've earned every single thing, but as a white person, there is privilege. And the more we can elevate black women, this is going to be a beautiful thing. That's when it was all over. And Angel Reese and Brittney Griner, they walk around like the league owes them something. Even Ryan Clark's attitude as if, bro, where's the victimhood? These are freaking millionaires. Like, what are you talking about? It's attitude, it's no humility, just entitlement, and that's not confidence.
During a press conference, Clark attempted to defuse the tension by acknowledging racial privilege, stating, I want to say I've earned every single thing, but as a white person, there is privilege. She followed it with a hopeful sentiment about elevating black women and making the league more inclusive. But rather than calming the storm, her remarks sparked a new wave of backlash. Critics accused her of pandering, while supporters questioned why she was apologizing at all. Patrick Bet David was especially critical, calling the move a strategic failure. He argued that Clark, who had been thriving through sheer performance, made the mistake of bending the knee to those who were never going to accept her. He framed it as a turning point, where Clark's decision to appease detractors damaged her credibility with both sides. Bet David warned that once an athlete strays from the lane of excellence and steps into identity politics, the backlash becomes inevitable. In his view, Clark's apology didn't elevate the conversation, it diluted her image. Rather than being celebrated for her record-breaking play, she was pulled into a political tug-of-war that had little to do with basketball. As tensions rose, Patrick Bet David turned his attention toward a target he viewed as equally responsible for the league's dysfunction, the mainstream sports media. In his analysis, the same outlets that remained silent or dismissive toward Brittney Griner's racially charged comment were the ones constantly dissecting and criticizing Caitlin Clark for far less. Bet David highlighted what he called a glaring double standard. Griner's conduct was treated with indifference, while Clark's every action, from on-court celebrations to off-court interviews, was scrutinized under a microscope. The message was clear: narrative trumped performance. In Bet David's view, this wasn't about basketball anymore. It was about controlling a storyline. He pointed to ESPN's glowing coverage of players like Angel Reese and Griner, despite their lackluster stats, and contrasted it with how Clark was portrayed as a polarizing figure simply for being popular and white. The bias, he claimed, wasn't just political, it was anti-meritocratic. Athletes with poor shooting percentages were elevated as cultural icons, while the one player driving Real viewership was being undermined. For Bet David, the hypocrisy was in plain sight, and the consequences were growing. By shielding its underperformers and vilifying its rising star, the media was helping dismantle the league's credibility from within. And the fans, he warned, were starting to notice. The numbers, Patrick Bet David argued, told a story that the media refused to confront. While Brittney Griner and Angel Reese continued to dominate headlines, their actual performance on the court was far from dominant. Griner, once seen as a generational talent, had shown visible decline, while Reese posted one of the lowest shooting percentages in WNBA history, just 22.7% from the field. Even shots within 5 feet of the basket, the simplest in the game, were converted by Reese at only 43.8%, an efficiency rate that raised eyebrows. Bet David didn't stop at numbers. He pointed out how those stats stood in stark contrast to the constant praise and protection both players receive. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark, despite being a rookie, led the league in media engagement, ticket sales, and merchandise revenue. Her debut season shattered viewership records, attracted sold-out crowds in every city she played, and even prompted game-time changes to accommodate demand. And yet, she was the one facing jeers, cheap fouls, and league silence in the face of blatant targeting. Bet David framed it as the ultimate disconnect. Performance was no longer what defined status in the WNBA. Instead, it was identity, marketability, and adherence to a media-friendly narrative. And in that environment, he warned, true talent was being buried beneath politics. Among the many bold claims Patrick Bet-David made, none drew more attention than his comparison of Caitlin Clark to Jackie Robinson. Not in the traditional sense of breaking racial barriers, but in the context of being a trailblazer, an outsider facing hostility from within the very institution she's helping to uplift. Bet-David argued that Clark, a white superstar in predominantly black league, is encountering resistance not because of a lack of talent, but because of what her success represents. Much like Robinson faced backlash from racist fans and players while integrating Major League Baseball, Clark is being met with resentment from fellow athletes, commentators, and cultural critics who see her rise as an existential threat to the status quo. The irony wasn't lost on Bet-David. Instead of being embraced for bringing record-breaking attention and revenue to the WNBA, Clark is being targeted, sidelined, and even physically hit in games. He suggested that Clark's impact on the league, bringing in new fans, sponsors, and global visibility, should be celebrated. Instead, it's triggering insecurity and division. The metaphor wasn't about race itself, but about cultural gatekeeping. Clark's presence has forced a reckoning within the league, and Bet-David framed it as the beginning of a civil war between old narratives and a new era of performance-driven relevance. In what became the crescendo of his blistering critique, Patrick Bet-David laid out a bleak but calculated diagnosis of the WNBA's self-inflicted collapse. He argued that the league, rather than rallying around its only bankable superstar, was actively sabotaging itself by elevating underperformers and silencing the one player bringing relevance to the sport. Clark's meteoric rise wasn't a threat to the league's image, it was a lifeline. Yet, through a toxic mix of identity politics, internal jealousy, and media manipulation, the WNBA appeared more committed to preserving fragile egos than seizing a historic opportunity. Bet-David predicted that with Clark sidelined by injury, the league would be exposed. Ratings would plummet, attendance would dip, and all the noise about teamwork over celebrity would fall flat in the face of a stark reality. Without Caitlin Clark, there is no national interest. His warning wasn't subtle. This was the last window for the WNBA to choose relevance over resentment. If the league continued poking holes in its only raft, it would sink, not because of lack of talent, but because of its refusal to evolve. The system wasn't just broken, it was actively rejecting the one force capable of saving it. In the end, Patrick Bet-David's takedown wasn't just a rant, it was a reckoning. Through his brutal honesty, he exposed not only the contradictions within the WNBA, but the broader cultural rot threatening its future. The league stands at a crossroads. One path rewards performance, integrity, and growth. The other clings to victimhood, favoritism, and empty narratives. Brittney Griner's viral comment was just the spark. What followed was a full-scale exposure of how far the league has strayed from its mission. As Clark continues to draw fans, revenue, and global attention, the question isn't whether she deserves the spotlight. The real question is whether the WNBA is prepared to accept that she's earned it. If it refuses to evolve, it risks losing everything: its audience, its relevance, and its future. Let the stats speak. Let the fans decide. And let this be the wake-up call the league can't afford to ignore. Comment, save the game, if the WNBA needs to change course before it's too late, and hit like and subscribe for more unfiltered coverage on the stories shaking up the sports world.